So I wanted to take a few minutes and talk through the pilot episode of This Is Us with you. As we talked about in class, the pilot episode simply means it's season 1, episode 1. So this is the episode that is supposed to hook audiences into watching the show. As we talked about in class, for this essay, you will write a compare and contrast of the pilot episode of This Is Us with that of the pilot episode of Parenthood, ultimately choosing which show you think does the better job of engaging audiences and enticing them into watching past this first episode. So, very simply put, the genre of this show is a 60-minute family drama. We're going to get launched into the Pearson family with Jack and Rebecca Pearson as the matriarch and patriarch of this family. And then we see their 3 children, Kevin, Kate, and Randall, and the struggles they are dealing with in present day. For this first episode, we see 2 basic settings. We're in the 1980s with Jack and Rebecca on the day of the triplets' birth. And then we also see 2016 on Randall, Kate, and Kevin's birthday, their 36th birthday. The premise of the story is simply the show exploring the messiness of life, particularly with a family setting in the lives of these 3 siblings and their parents, Jack and Rebecca Pearson. What we see as the episode unfolds is that there are 4 basic storylines. The first begins on Jack's 36th birthday, which is August 31st, 1980. We are brought into a scene where Rebecca and Jack are going through this birthday tradition with cake and a dance and a song and other things. And ultimately we see Rebecca's water break and the couple rush off to the hospital. Once they get to the hospital, they learn that their doctor that was supposed to be there, Dr. Snyder, has a ruptured appendix. And as a result, Dr. K steps in to go through the labor and delivery of these babies that Rebecca is carrying. Ultimately, the first baby's born and everything's fine with that child, but Rebecca goes into distress and Jack is ushered out of the room to wait to find out what happens with the babies. Ultimately, after performing a C-section, Dr. K breaks the news to Jack that one of the babies didn't make it, the second boy. And so while his wife is fine and the first 2 babies are fine, their lives are maybe not going to look exactly like they thought that they would. We see earlier in the episode where Jack is even unwilling really to consider the idea that all 3 babies won't make it. And so we know that this is a real blow to Jack and to Rebecca, where they ultimately resolve that, we will go home with 3 babies. It's Jack's birthday. Bad things don't happen on Jack's birthday. But we find out that, as it turns out, they're not going to go home with the 3 babies they thought they would. Dr. K does provide a little nugget of wisdom for Jack, and after that conversation, when Jack goes to see the babies in the nursery, he is informed about a baby that was left at a fire station who is in need of parents, and we see at the end that Jack and Rebecca take home 3 babies, even though although they lost one of their babies, they end up taking home and adopting Randall, the baby that was left at the fire station. Our second storyline revolves around Kate Pearson. For her story begins in current day on her 36th birthday, which is August 31st, 2016. I guess you could argue that her story also starts in 1980 on her birthday, but our current storyline for her is on her 36th birthday. So we understand that this is exactly 36 years after Jack's birthday, which would make him in 2016 potentially 72. In this episode for Kate, we see that she's really struggling with her weight, and after falling on the scale and taking off all of her clothing and even her earrings, that she's really at a low point. She ends up with a pep talk in the bathroom with Kevin where she decides she will, quote, lose the damn weight. She is tired of being obese and she wants to make some changes in her life. This ultimately leads Kate to a support group for those who struggle with their weight. And she meets an interesting guy, Toby, who has a clear sense of humor. He sees the humor of what's going on in the support group, even though he is an active participant of that group. We see that Kate seems to be pretty committed to losing weight. Toby's not quite as committed, but ultimately decides that, you know what, if he can get to know Kate better, he will, in fact, too, be committed to losing the weight. From there, these two go on a pretty awkward yet successful first date that ends with Kate and Toby working to comfort Kevin after he has self-destructed. We see them have these, kind of awkward moments where Toby's kind of forward and Kate is a lot maybe insecure and really unsure of herself. But we see their night ending with a kiss, and that is a really happy moment for Kate. And it's suggested that this couple is going to move forward in some sort of a relationship form as this show progresses, at least in, the upcoming episodes. Storyline 3 revolves around Randall Pearson, and his story begins on his 36th birthday, August 31st, 2016. Of course, we do meet him in 1980 as he is the infant that is brought in from the fire station. His moment of crisis for this episode is that he has been searching for his biological father, William, who left him at the fire station the day he was born. Ultimately, he goes to William's home and confronts him in an effort to basically say, screw you, I didn't need you, look at who I've become. But we see Randall having this really complex set of emotions where he's confronting William, but he is also very much craving William's approval and to get to know William. It's not simply what he wants it to be, which is look at me, screw you. Instead, it's look at me and, oh, please love me. And so this really manifests into Randall bringing William home to meet his wife and children. This totally surprises his wife, Beth, who was not anticipating Randall bringing home William, even though Randall had told her he had found William. She's clearly caught off guard that he's brought William home. In fact, Randall seems pretty caught off guard with the fact that he's brought William to his home. Randall seems to be experiencing some sort of a nervous break. We don't know exactly what's going on at this point, but we are kind of given the impression that this upheaval in Randall's life of finding William and confronting William and having William in his home is probably going to lead us down a path that deals in some way with Randall's mental health, as you would expect it to, probably, because finding one's birth parent who left them in a fire station on the day they were born probably is pretty dramatic and pretty life altering, and a lot for one to wrap their head around. Upon finding out that William's dying at the end of the episode, we see Randall inviting William to stay in his home. At this point, we don't know for what period of time, but we do know at the very least Randall takes William into his home, and we know that moving forward that the story is probably going to explore the time that William has and Randall's maybe willingness or not so much to get to know William. Although it is made pretty clear in this episode that Randall is probably going to want to establish some sort of relationship with William, even though that's not maybe his first instinct. It's what's maybe lying in his gut that he needs to do. Then we have storyline 4, which revolves around Kevin, and the story begins for Kevin on his 36th birthday on August 31st, 2016. He's clearly quite unhappy with his life and his career. He is an actor who wants to take on roles that are more substantive, yet he's working on this silly show called The Manny that has made him famous, but ultimately requires him to work shirtless and do kind of ridiculous things like having a baby breastfeed from a grown man, which, as Kevin mentions in the episode, is ridiculous. He even questions, does the Manny have brain damage? Clearly he doesn't think this is a possibility of something that should be happening. Ultimately, after he's given a meteor storyline and the director, Casey, makes him do a more lighthearted version or ask him to do a more lighthearted version, we see him totally losing it on the set of his hit sitcom. It's recorded. We know it hits YouTube. It probably goes viral. We see later on in the episode, even Mario Lopez reporting on the Manny losing it. And he has totally set his life into a state of disarray and catastrophe. He has self-sabotaged and self-destructed in a way that's clearly unhealthy, but perhaps is the right decision because he's clearly quite unhappy with where his career is and the state of his life on his 36th birthday. Ultimately, we see him seek solace with his sister Kate, and Toby's there as well. He, in a fairly humorous way, interrupts Kate and Toby's date at her home, just as things appear to potentially become intimate with Kate and Toby. And then we see Kevin question, what's he going to do with his life? He can't do Broadway. He's not a singer. Toby suggests porn. He says, well, maybe that's an option. So we don't really know where his life's going. We know he's in a moment of crisis and despair because his dissatisfaction with his life ultimately leads him into a decision that will certainly have great ramifications on his life. We know moving forward that we're going to see him dealing with this impulsive decision he made to really blow up his spot on this hit TV show. Ultimately, the theme of the show really deals with all of these major characters in a moment of crisis. And the show really explores how the characters respond to those crises. We have this really important quote that comes from Dr. K and kind of shapes thematically where the show's going. Dr. K says to Jack, after revealing to Jack that one of his babies has not made it, that I like to think that one day you'll be an old man like me, talking a young man's ear off, explaining to him how you took the sourest lemon that life has to offer and turned it into something resembling lemonade. If you can do that, then maybe you will still be taking 3 babies home from this hospital, just maybe not the way you planned. So here we have this idea of one taking a sour lemon and making something that resembles lemonade. And we see how Dr. K passes this on to Jack. Jack then ends up going home with 3 babies that do, in fact, come about in a way that's not what he had planned. It's not that Dr. K knows that there's this 3rd baby out there. He's just trying to provide Jack some perspective and a way to look at the world, to make something good come out of something that's really hard and tragic. And we even see this idea being explored further in Jack's adult children. When Kate says, hey, you remember what Dad used to say about sour lemons and making lemonade? So we see that this adage from Dr. K has become in many ways a mantra for Jack and the way Jack lives his life and builds his family with Rebecca. And we see that even come up on this birthday of these 3 children. And that really does shape thematically what's happening in this story, that even though in a moment of crisis, rather than falling totally into despair, that we try to find that silver lining. We try to find a way to make something that's at least somewhat good happen. And it seems that Jack does accomplish this in that he goes home with 3 babies, and those 3 babies grow up to be 3 adults who, while also on their 36th birthday, find themselves in a place of crisis. He's clearly built a beautiful life for his family. We see a number of social issues tackled in the show. When we look at Jack and Rebecca's storyline, we see this idea of becoming new parents, of the loss of a child, of adoption, particularly the adoption of a child that's not the same race that Jack and Rebecca are. So we know that that's going to move forward, and as the show moves on, as being this idea that's going to be explored, because clearly that will present challenges. We see Kate dealing with extreme obesity and the struggle to lose weight. We also see her taking on this new relationship with another person who struggles with their weight. So we have these 2 people who are struggling similarly, but we understand that there could be some conflict on how they both approach it, or if they both are wanting to lose the weight truly. We see Randall dealing with the abandonment that comes with having been abandoned by his biological father, and then going through the process of meeting that biological father, finding out that that parent is dying, and all that's going to come with that emotionally. And then I didn't put this on here, but we have to imagine that Randall is going to struggle as well with some form of guilt, because he does have this great family in the Pearsons who have adopted him, and he is one of the integral parts of this family. And so he probably is going to deal with, well, by finding William and getting to know William, am I betraying that family? So we really see the show trying to kind of take on this idea of adoption and biological parents and what that all means. And then finally, we see Kevin dealing with dissatisfaction in a career and being in an ultimately unhappy place in his life and trying to navigate that, which in each of these cases, we have social issues at play, we have themes at play that really are relatable to most viewers in some form or another. This was just a brief look at this episode of the show. There's clearly so many other things that you could look at this and consider about this show, but I think this is a good starting point for you as you move forward, thinking about how this show is going to compare to the pilot episode of Parenthood that you'll be watching soon. I hope this video helps, and if you have questions, let me know.